What is going on, everybody? This, of course, is Todd Brown. Welcome to the first of two sessions for the Advanced Metrics and Tracking Strategies of the Direct Response Marketing Pros. We're going to get started in just about 30 seconds. Before we do that, if you can go ahead and let me know that you can see my screen A-OK, that you can hear me A-OK, that all looks good. That'll make me feel a heck of a lot better to know that I'm not talking to myself here. And so, okay, cool. So awesome. Thank you, Dave and Jeff. And hey, Tim, what's going on, buddy? And Craig and Shane. Very cool. Okay, so like I said, this course, as you can see on your screen, session 1 of 2 for the Advanced Metrics and Tracking Strategies training. And everything that you are going to see and hear today, of course, is being recorded and will be available for you within the next 24 hours. Excuse me. And so I do recommend, though, that you take notes. We're going to cover a bunch of material over these two sessions. I get the easy and fun job today. The next session with Damian Lanfranchi, the co-founder of ConversionFly, is where you're really going to get down into the kind of in the trenches, the nitty gritty and whatnot. But you are going to want to take notes because there's going to be a tremendous amount of material that we cover. Let me give you first and foremost the simple agenda of this training so you understand exactly where we're going over these next two sessions and what you should expect from each session. So as you know, this is a 2-session training program. It's about 3 hours, give or take. The first session, which is today, is very simple. Today is all about the metrics. It's all about you understanding the way the direct response pros look at their metrics. We're going to cut out a lot of the fluff. We're going to cut out a lot of the nonsense, and we're going to make sure that you understand the key big monster numbers that you need to look at, what they mean, how to really think about those numbers, and how to do that, how to apply that thinking both on the front end of your business and the back end. And then tomorrow in session 2, you're going to understand how to track those numbers, right? And how to actually run those reports so that you can make the right decisions with those numbers so that you understand exactly what is going on in your business. Now, the thing that I want you to understand of why this is so important, like I'll tell you that I believe that even though you're going to find this is a rather simple training, I truly believe that this is it's simple, right? These are simple ideas, simple concepts, simple methods for you to grasp. But I want you to understand that I truly believe this is at the foundation of you being able to make monster money. You don't be fooled by the fact that I've simplified this for you and that I've really boiled this down to the essence. I want you to understand that I truly believe that a lack of understanding in this area, especially the things that I'm going to share with you today, is what holds the majority of marketers back from ever making big monster money, from ever really truly being able to scale big and fast. And you're going to see that at the root of that, at the root of all of that, really is a mindset. It's an understanding, if you will, in the way you need to look at your numbers, what numbers you need to look at, and really ultimately the numbers that you should be shooting for. Like I've said before, like you've probably heard many direct response marketing individuals that have been in the trenches for any significant length of time say, this whole business of direct response marketing, the whole entire game that we are involved in, right? Direct response marketing is that it's all about psychology, communication, and arithmetic. Right? It's all about, first and foremost, psychology. It's about understanding your prospect. It's about understanding their fears, their desires, right? Their understanding, their awareness level, the things that that they've been told before, the things that they've been shown before, the things that they've been promised before, and how that impacts their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions, right? The situation that they're in, the obstacle that they are faced with, right? No matter how big or small it may be, and all of the thoughts and feelings that they have about those things. It's about communication, because it's all about not only it's about what we say and how we say it. It's about positioning. It's about framing. It's about word choice. It's about how we take certain ideas and then ultimately craft those ideas into a headline, into the lead of a sales letter or a VSL or the script for a webinar, right? It's all about the things that we say and how we say them, and the things that we don't say, and how all of those things impact the thoughts and feelings and emotions of your prospect. It really is about us shaping and molding through what we say and how we say it and when we say it and whatnot, their psychology, right? Now, those are two aspects of what I spend the majority of my time on when coaching clients, when teaching students, when working with clients that come in for an all-day intensive. That's typically where we invest the majority of our time. But it's this third component that I believe a lot of marketers don't understand, or they don't understand the right way they need to be looking at these numbers. They need to be viewing these numbers. They need to kind of understand and utilize these numbers. And that's arithmetic, right? That at the end of the day, the direct response business is all about psychology, communication, and math, period. And it's the reality is that when we take the direct response component out of the game, and when we're talking about brand institutional advertising, when we're talking about advertising or marketing that doesn't ask for an immediate direct response, a yes or no, some type of response, and or when we're not tracking and quantifying the numbers, if you will, well, that's when we lose the whole scientific aspect of direct response, right? The beauty of what we do is that it can be boiled down to formulas. It can be boiled down to a science. It could be boiled down to objective data, meaning it can be taken out of the world of subjectivity, out of the world of assumptions, out of the world of opinions, out of the world of guesswork, and it can be boiled down to objective data, where the data drives your decisions. The data drives what you do next. The data drives the changes, the enhancements, the optimizations. And the beauty is that with the data, with the arithmetic, with the math, right? With the math, we are able to methodically, scientifically improve our results, improve our response rates, improve our sales, improve our customer acquisition, improve our income month after month after month after month. And it's only with the data that we can do that. That's why, not only is direct response marketing more powerful than, when it's done right, more powerful than brand institutional advertising, right? Excuse me, but it is scientific, and it is it gives us the ability to optimize and improve our results without guessing, without assuming, right? Without opinions, right? Without all that nonsense that can take an awful long time and be extremely expensive before we see any improvement. And so I share that and I drive that into you, and I've spent the last handful of minutes focusing on this arithmetic, because it's not only recognizing that, right? It's not only understanding the value of the math in what we do, but then it's committing to focusing on that math. It's committing to understanding the math. It's committing to the right mindset, the right perspective with the math, right? And it's committing to getting the right numbers and using the right numbers the right way to make all of your decisions going forward. That's what we're talking about today. And I'm going to give you the simplest, quickest, straightest line to understand the way the biggest direct response pros look at that arithmetic component. Now, for the purpose of scaling, and this is the very first mindset shift that I want you to make. For the purpose of scaling, we're talking about now in a second, we're going to get into the difference between front end and back end and how you have to look at the front end and the metrics that you use with the front end and whatnot. And we're going to look at the back end. But for the purpose of scaling, for the purpose of scaling your business, for the purpose of growing your business, you need to look at your metrics. You need to look at the data, not through the lens of some online marketer, which, by the way, I hate it when people refer to us as online marketers. I hate it when, it drives me crazy when our chief operating officer here at MFA, Damien, who again is the co-founder of ConversionFly, you're going to hear from. I hate it when he says, online marketers, because we're not online marketers, right? We are direct response marketers, and the primary channel that we happen to utilize is the internet, right? But if you're smart and savvy, you utilize other channels besides just the internet. We use the telephone, right? We use direct mail. We've used in the past space advertising, and so we are more than just online marketers. But I want you to think beyond that typical mindset of like I'm a web marketer. Like I will leave behind the idea of analytics. Forget analytics. We're not talking about what web browser people use. We're not talking about what size monitor they use. We're not talking about what their operating system is. I want you to think a lot simpler. And I want you to think of, when it comes to the purpose of scaling your business and looking at your metrics and your data, I want you to think through the lens of you are an investor. Period. You are an investor, and you are focusing on a type of investing that we call asset acquisition investing, right? We're not talking about crazy analytics. We're not talking about time on page. We're not talking about bounce rate. I'm not talking about any of that in this context, right? Personally, I don't look at any of those numbers. I haven't looked at any of those numbers in years. Those are valuable numbers, those analytics, and there are things that you can do with analytics, and there are things that your company should do with analytics, but that's not what we're talking about today. That's not what the biggest direct response companies, the biggest direct response marketers focus on. In all of my discussions with Agora, in all of my discussions with my friend Joe over at Agora Financial, analytics, the typical website analytics, has never come up, not once, right? Not once. I chuckled many years ago when I was talking to Mark Ford. Many of you know him as Michael Masterson. He's the chief consultant behind Agora Inc., a $500 million a year information marketing behemoth. He didn't even know what half of the analytics were. And right, it was at that time, many years ago, that it really opened my eyes to the fact that, my gosh, we allow our thinking, we allow our focus to get clouded by really inconsequential metrics or inconsequential analytics, inconsequential numbers. Just because there is a number that exists, just because you can track a certain number, just because you can run a report on a certain number, doesn't mean that you should. And in my opinion, especially as it relates to what it is that we're talking about today, the overwhelming majority of data that comes through your traditional analytics is a waste of your mind space within the context of scaling. And so I want you to begin thinking like an investor, right? And when you really think like an investor and you really boil it down to what an investor needs to know, right? There are certain very simple numbers that at the core of investing, you need to understand. When you're investing in an asset, you really need to understand, right, at the core, at the foundation, you need to understand first and foremost, what is the asset worth today? What am I going to pay for that asset today? And what is that asset going to be worth in the future? And what is that asset going to be worth at multiple points in the future, right? So if you know that there is a particular asset that's worth $1,000 today and you can get it for, 200, well, we don't need to know a heck of a lot more than to know that that's a good deal, right? If we can get an asset that's worth $1,000 today for 200, that's a good deal. If we can get an asset that's worth $1,000 today and it's worth and we can get it for 900, right? That's not as good of a deal, but it's still a good deal. If we can get an asset that's worth $1,000 today, but we have to pay $3,000 for it, today, well, now we need more data. There's a little bit more information that we need to know in order to determine whether that is a good investment. And that the next thing that we need to know is, well, what is that asset going to be worth in the future? Right? Well, if we found out that that asset is going to be worth $10,000 in the future, even though it's worth only $1,000 today, it's going to be worth $1,000 in the future, and we can get it for $2,000. Well, now that is a good deal. However, there's one more piece of information that we need to know in order to be able to determine whether we should make that investment, right? And that is, there's really two different sides of the same coin. One is, do we have that money on hand, right? Do we have that money? Like, can we afford to go out of pocket by $2,000 to make $10,000 in the future? And the second piece that we need to know is, well, how quickly is it going to reach a value of 10,000? Meaning, how quickly are we going to make our money back and see a profit, right? Well, just with that one little example right there, and almost no additional data, no additional numbers, no additional math, you should already have a basic level of understanding of what it means to think like an asset acquisition investor, which is the way the biggest, most successful direct response companies look at their numbers. And so what is the asset that you're investing in? What is the asset that we're acquiring? Well, it is a customer, period. So for now on, I want you to think of yourselves as an investor in the acquisition of an asset. That asset is a customer. There's a certain amount of money that customer is worth today, right? And then there's a certain amount of money that customer is going to be worth over the next year, 2 years, life of the life of your ownership of that asset, right? And so there's an asset, the customer, it's worth a certain amount of money today. It's going to be worth a certain amount of money over the coming year in the life of your ownership. Right? And that is going to tell us an awful lot about what you should be willing to do to acquire that asset, right? Forget all of these other forget getting caught up in all of this, the minutia of but what about cost per click, Todd? What about cost per acquisition? What about cost per lead? What about EPC? What about all those things? All of those things, right? They are valuable in a certain context, and you're going to learn more of that about that context within session 2, but it really, all of those numbers, all of those metrics, all of those different ways of looking at the data are really just different ways of looking at what is the customer worth, right? And what are you, or what should you be willing to spend? At the end of the day, I've said it before, and excuse me, and I'll say it again, that when I am testing, and I'll show you this. Let's see if I can do this. When I am testing a new funnel, there are 2 different sets of metrics that I look at whenever we are testing a brand new funnel, whenever we're rolling out a new funnel and we're testing it with cold traffic. On the right side, we have what are called our optimization metrics. These are things like opt-in rate, sales conversion rate, order form abandonment rate, and then upsell take rate, right? These are the 4 optimization metrics that we look at. But here's the reality. The reality is that none of these numbers, none of these metrics, none of this data tells you the viability of a funnel. None of these numbers tell you whether you should continue to scale the funnel, whether you should scrap the funnel, whether you need to redo the funnel, whether this funnel is going to make you money, cost you money. None of those numbers in any combination tell you any of that. The reality is that you can have a sky-high opt-in rate and be losing money every day. You could have a sky-high opt-in rate and a sky-high sales conversion rate and be losing money every day. You could have a sky high opt-in rate, sky high sales conversion rate, and rock bottom low order form abandonment rate. And you can have a low order form abandonment rate and a sky high upsell take rate, and you could still be losing money. Right? At the end of the day, the only thing that determines the viability of a funnel is ROI, is return on investment. What am I talking about when I say ROI? I'm talking about how much money came back for how much money you laid out. So many of you have heard me say before that excuse me, that the only scalable method of customer acquisition, the only truly scalable, reliable way of customer acquisition is through media buying, is through paid traffic. A reliance on SEO, a reliance on search engine rankings, a reliance on affiliates or JVs or launches every couple of months makes your business incredibly vulnerable. I've said before, when it comes to SEO, you could have the number one ranking for the number one keyword or keyword phrase in your market. You could have the number one ranked listing for the number one keyword or keyword phrase for your market, for your niche, for your universe, right? And what do you do when you want to scale that? What do you do with that number one ranking when you say, wow, we've got an offer that's working and now I want to grow it. Now I want to scale it up. Now I want to get more customers. Now I want to get more traffic. Well, the reality is there's zero that you can do. You cannot do anything because there's only a certain amount of searches that keyword or keyword phrase gets, and there's only a certain amount of clicks that you're going to get in that number one listing. Granted, you're going to get the greatest amount of clicks of the organic listings, but there's nothing that you can do to increase it. You have no control over that. As well, your business is incredibly vulnerable because Google can make an algorithm change and the next day that number one ranking could be gone. You could now be ranked number 11, or number 111, right? And anything but that first page, anything but that top listing is going to cause a massive and rapid decline in your traffic. Right? No, the only thing that's scalable, the only thing that's reliable is the ability to acquire customers from paid traffic, right? It's something that I first learned many years ago after a conversation with Rich Schefren. Many of you may know Rich Schefren as the guru to the gurus, the guy that at one point coached all of the top marketers online. All of the top marketers at one point or another have gone to Rich for either coaching, consulting, or guidance, whether it be Frank Kern, Ryan Deiss, Jeff Walker, me, Russell Brunson, you name it, they've all gone through in some way, shape, or form Rich Schefren. Well, I'm fortunate to call Rich a friend, and Rich shared with me one day when I said to him, like, I was struggling. This is many years ago, and I said to him I was struggling with the ups and downs of cash flow, the ups and downs of sales. Like, I never knew when, what the week would bring. I never knew today whether we were going to do 0 or we were going to do 2,000. I never knew if next week we were going to have a $30,000 week, or we were going to have a $17,000 week, or a $6,000 week. Like, and I was like, I don't even know what the deal is, right? And I said, I'm trying all these things. We're doing article distribution. We're doing blah, 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 all these things. And he looked at me and he after I was done ranting, and he said, look, until you can acquire a customer, right, from paid traffic, until you can afford to pay for the acquisition of a customer, you don't have a business. You simply have a promotion. Period. End of the story. And he's right. When I took a step back and I looked at all of the biggest direct response marketers and all of the biggest direct response companies, I very quickly saw that none of them relied on affiliates. None of them relied on JVs. That's not to say that they didn't use JVs. That's not to say that they didn't utilize affiliates. That's not to say that they didn't do periodic product launches, but they were the gravy. That was the icing on the cake. That was the seasoning in the meal. It wasn't the meal itself, right? And if they never got another affiliate or never got another JV, right, or never did another product launch, they would still be able to grow their business. They would still be able to scale. Right. And so that's why I say that for me, it's all about, right. When I started marketing funnel automation, right, when I started this particular the marketing funnel automation brand just a handful of years ago, I swore that I would never be in a position to have to rely on affiliates or joint ventures or launches. I would never have to rely on it. That's why you very rarely see me doing affiliate promotions. It's why we very rarely have other people promoting us. It's not because we don't get requests all the time. It's not because there aren't individuals that I have a tremendous amount of respect for that don't want to promote. No, right? It's because it's the lowest priority on our list, right? And for me, when we do it, it's simply gravy, it's simply icing, right? And so that's why I say that everything goes through, right? For me, it's all about a dollar out and how much comes back. It's all about how much do we lay out in traffic, in media buying, and how much does that bring us back, right? How much value in the form of customers does that bring us back? And just as a side note, because I want you to get this one other shift in thinking, and I know we're only on slide 5, but I want you to get this, okay? And that is that many years ago, and I still see this from the majority of new marketers online, but many years ago, I bought into the lie that the goal, the aim was to decrease my ad spend, to decrease my marketing budget as low as I possibly could, to strive to increase the profitability of my company by decreasing my costs as much as I could. One of those costs being decreasing my advertising spend, right? So, in my mind, it was, let's see how low we can get our marketing budget. Let's see how low we can get our advertising budget every month and still grow the business and still acquire customers and still, just scale the business, right? Well, the reality is that that's the complete opposite way the biggest direct response companies and marketers think. It's the complete antithesis of the mindset that you need to have. And it was only after I abandoned that mindset and I adopted the correct mindset, which I'm going to give you in just a second, did my businesses start to scale and grow very quickly. And the mindset that you need to have is that your aim is to be able to invest the most amount of money every single month into the acquisition of customers. My goal is not to invest the least. Today, my goal is to invest the most. I want to look at my budget, look at the amount of money that we've invested as a company over the last quarter. And my goal is to increase that over the coming quarter, over the next quarter. I want to look at the amount of money that we've invested into the acquisition of customers in 2015. And I want that to increase significantly in 2016, and you need to do the same thing, right? Understand, as you're going to see in just a little bit, if every time you invest $1, and I want you to pay attention to this, I want you to hear me. If every time we invest $1, you get $1 back in the form of a new customer, right? In the form of a new sale, right? In the form of new leads, more leads on your email list and a particular customer. Well, number one, does it make any sense whatsoever to have an arbitrary budget of how many dollars you could put out? Understand, every time you put out $1, just $1, you get $1 back in the form of a new sale with a customer, and you get 1 or 2 or 3 leads that come back, right? It makes no sense for you to put an arbitrary limit, an arbitrary budget on how many dollars you're willing to put out there every day, because all you're doing is setting an arbitrary number that's holding you back, right? Why would I want to say I'm only going to invest $1,000 a month or put $1,000 out when for every dollar that I put out, I get $1 back plus a customer plus more leads? No, if that's the case, that's not an expense. Some of you have heard me say this before on other trainings in other programs, that it's not an expense. Marketing the way we do it, when you structure your funnel the right way, is not an expense like your telephone, like your lights, like your utility bill, like it's none of those things. It's not an expense. It's an investment. It's an investment that comes back to you and then brings more profit back, right? And so if you're able to put out $1 and you get $1 back, right? Or you're able to put out $1 and you get back $1.50, right? The goal is not to limit how many dollars you can put out. The goal is to maximize the dollars that you can put out. Put out as many dollars as you can, do it as often as you can, and do it in the largest quantity that you possibly can. So your goal shouldn't be to invest the least amount of money every month. Your goal should be to invest the most amount. And I can tell you that every 7 an 8-figure client company that that I run or that I work with or that I consult for invests thousands and thousands of dollars every month into customer acquisition. They don't. I've never come across a 7 or 8-figure business or client, and I'm fortunate to get to consult with some of the biggest on the planet. Literally, I have not encountered anybody that is investing $5,000 or $4,000 a month into customer acquisition and is like, and is raving about that. Many of these companies are spending $50,000, $60,000, $80,000, $90,000. We have a client that invests over $500,000 a month in email solo ads. They run about 180 email solo ads a month. Now, look, I want you to understand, as you're going to learn in a second, we're not talking about starting with starting with $500,000 in the bank, waiting for you to invest it in traffic. We're not talking about starting with 50,000 or 20,000 or, like the most amount that we've ever invested for marketing funnel automation in a single month was about like $93,000 or $94,000 in a single month. We didn't start out with that money set aside just for traffic. We for every dollar that we put out, when that dollar came back, we put the dollar out again to work for us. Every time we did that with $100, with $500, with $1,000, we put it out into the market, right? And we just kept turning over the same amount of money day after day after day, or really, every so many hours after so many hours, day after day after day after day after day after day. And at the end of the month, it added up to, like I said, over $90,000. The thing that I want you to understand is that we are investing in the acquisition of an asset. That asset that we are investing in is a customer, and that the thing that you want to understand is return on investment. All of these metrics, opt-in rate, sales conversion rate, order form abandonment rate, upsell take rate, these are only metrics that we use to optimize our funnel. That's it. That's all they are for. They are for when the time comes where we are going to optimize and improve the results of our funnel, which is a totally different phase of the engineering process, or the architecting process. It's the stage where we call it in-house enhance as part of our E5 framework. That's all these are for. These are not like, you don't use these to determine scalability. You don't use these to determine whether you're going to continue to run the funnel. You don't use these, no matter how low any of these are. If the ROI is there, I'm going to continue to run the funnel. Just like if the ROI isn't there and I'm getting clobbered, and for every dollar I'm putting out in traffic, I am getting back 20 cents. I don't care how high these are. We're not going to run the funnel as is. We're going to go back and make some tweaks. Now, I want you to understand the whole entire direct response game, and many of you, most of you, if not all of you, should be familiar with the front end and the back end. Now, just for clarification purposes, I want to tell you what these are, and I want you to understand the purpose of each, right? Because it's one thing to know what it is that we're talking about when we're talking about these two different areas of marketing your business, but it's another thing to be able to understand the purpose of each. So first and foremost, the front end is all of the marketing that we do with prospects. Back end is all the marketing that we do with customers. A customer is an individual. For the purpose of this discussion, for this slide, a customer is an individual that has made one or more purchases or has participated in one or more transactions with your business. Now, the reason why I said that for within this context, that's how we're going to define a customer, because you're going to see in just a little bit when we get to the main back end metrics that there's the difference between, we can really break that down between an active customer and an inactive customer, right? Because a customer is really, when you take it to the end, to the extreme, if you will, right? A customer is not only somebody that's made one or more or has participated in one or more transactions with you, but a customer is somebody that has a likelihood of making another purchase with you, right? And so somebody that, let's say, bought something from you 2 years ago and hasn't bought anything since isn't necessarily a customer anymore, right? We consider that at MFA, we consider that an inactive customer. And an inactive customer, even though they're considered a customer and they get treated differently from a prospect, they don't get communicated with the same way that we communicate with active customers. But again, front end, all the marketing that you do with prospects; back end, all the marketing that you do with customers. The purpose of the front end, listen to me carefully. The purpose of the front end is maximum customer acquisition. It's maximum customer acquisition. And I'll add on to that, as you're about to understand, as you're about to learn, at a reasonable cost. Right? Well, what a reasonable cost is, as you're going to learn, is different for every business. You're going to be able to determine what that is or understand what that reasonable cost is by the time that we are done. But our goal on the front end is not to generate profit, right? It's not to spend $1 and make back $1.50 or $2 or $6, right? The purpose of the front end is maximum customer acquisition. The purpose of the front end is for every dollar that I put out there is to bring me back the most amount of customers that I possibly can, right? So it's not simply to generate sales, right? Like the purpose of the front end isn't to generate sales. The purpose of the front end isn't to generate profit. The purpose of the front end isn't just to return my ad spend, right? Like, so it's not just to simply break even, right? It's maximum customer acquisition. And you'll understand more about that in just a bit. The purpose of the back end, right, is, is to maximize profit through the maximization of lifetime customer value. It's to maximize profit for your company through maximizing of lifetime customer value. Lifetime customer value is the average amount of money that the average customer spends with you. So it's an average. It's the average value of a customer that comes into your business. And it's the average value over the life of their patronage in your business, right? It's saying every time you get a customer, how much is that customer worth on average? Some customers might be worth $1,000. Some might be worth $500. Some might be worth $10. But when you look at all of your customers and you look at the amount that they spend, you're going to come up with an average number. And you're going to know that on average, every customer that you get is worth a certain amount of money. It's worth $450, right? Well, our goal is to increase that number. Through increasing that number, that is how we increase your profit. And you'll understand when we break that down a little bit and I show you how to score your back end and how to monitor the health of your back end. Now, I want to talk first about the front end, right? So we said, understand that there are two different objectives of these two different categories of marketing, right? And look, this is not the time or the place to get into this, but constructing a front-end funnel is different from constructing a back-end funnel. The level of awareness that individuals have when you're constructing a front-end funnel is different from the level of awareness that customers have when you're constructing a back-end funnel, right? And so even the way we go about the strategy behind crafting or engineering and architecting a front-end funnel and a back-end funnel are different. But what I'm talking about today for right now in this session is the arithmetic behind the front end and the back end is different. The math, what we're looking for, is not the same from the front end and the back end. So for the next little bit of our session today, I want to talk to you about the front end. And then I'm going to finish up by talking to you about the back end. Now, as it relates to the front end, and I want you to get this, okay? Please understand this. The thing that determines your ability to scale big and fast, the one thing that determines how big and fast you can grow, right? And really, the key here is really speed, meaning, right, like really what we're really talking about is how fast can you grow big? How fast, the one thing that determines how fast you can grow very, very large comes down to one thing. Who thinks they know what that one thing is? If you think that you know what that one thing is, go ahead and you can type it into the box. I'm just curious. But this is one of those things that, right, when I share this with you, this is one of those things that I want you to ponder later on, because this is one of the things that it was only here that it was only when my mindset, when I learned the flaw in my mindset and I made the change to what it is that you're about to see and learn, was I able to grow my businesses at a much faster pace. And so let's just see here. So Kerry said cash flow. Michael said what you can spend to acquire a customer. James said how much you can pay to acquire new clients over and above the competition. And Shane said the ability to spend more to acquire a customer with more ROI. Great answers. And you guys, you are all right. You're all right. I categorize this as your level of acquisition aggression. And really what I mean by this, and it's you guys are all right, but I want to show you the variation in your thinking. So, and I know that it might be just the way that you guys communicated it, but I just want to make sure that I drive this home. So, and great job for you guys that got it and answered it, right? So Michael said, right, what you can spend to acquire a customer. And James said, how much can you pay to acquire a customer over and above competition, right? And Shane said, your ability to spend more to acquire a customer. And all of those answers are really kind of variations of the same thing. And they're all accurate, except there is one aspect of those answers that I want to address. And what Michael said was what you can spend, right? And James said how much you can spend. And Shane said your ability to spend. Well, it's more than just what you can spend, and it's more in how much you can spend and your ability to spend. It's your willingness to spend, right? And what I mean by that is that you might be able to afford $100 to pay $100 per client, right? But there are lots and lots of marketers that, first and foremost, there are lots and lots of marketers that don't even understand what it is that you guys already understand. And so kudos for being that much further ahead. The majority of marketers don't even understand what it is that you guys just said. But then there are marketers that, because they don't really understand the purpose of the front end, they don't really get that it's not just customer acquisition, but it's maximum customer acquisition, right? It's not simply customer acquisition, it's maximum customer acquisition, right? And so when you're talking about customer acquisition, right, and you're talking about maximum customer acquisition, you're talking about your willingness to be aggressive with what it is that you do spend to acquire a customer. It's one thing to say I can afford to spend $100 to acquire a single customer. It's another thing to say I'm going to spend $100 to acquire a single new customer, right? And so it's because you might recognize that you can afford to spend $100 to acquire a customer, but be only willing to spend 50 or 60 or 70 or 80 to acquire a single customer. And so the other thing, and where you're going to see where this is really kind of where you separate the men from the boys and the women from the girls, is in how are you determining what it is that you can spend to acquire a customer, right? And so you're going to understand in just a second on the very next slide the 3 levels of acquisition aggression, and you're going to understand that, right? That the what it is that you believe you can afford to spend varies per entrepreneur. And that's why I said it's all about your acquisition aggression, right? It's all about your willingness to be more aggressive when it comes to the acquisition of customers, because your level of aggression will determine the quantity of customers that you actually acquire. So 3 levels of acquisition aggression. Level 1, which is the lowest level, is really is the mom and pop level. And this is where the typical entrepreneur, the typical small business person, the typical business owner operates. You talk to the typical business owner outside of the world of direct response, and they would tell you that the reason why they are trying to acquire customers is because a customer leads to a transaction, and through a transaction, they've got profit, right? And in their mind, there is no differentiation between the front end and the back end. In their mind, they have a transactional mindset. Every single transaction is all about one thing and one thing only, and that is generating profit. That's profit margin. And so they look for the same thing on a front end transaction that they do a back end, right? To them, there is no difference. They're looking for a certain margin. It could be a 50% profit margin. It could be an 80% profit margin. It could be a 20% profit margin, whatever it is. But they look at every transaction as for the same purpose, the same objective, and that is to generate profit. They look at the acquisition of a customer through the lens of the transactional value to them, the profit to them. Well, if every transaction, if you're looking for a profit from every transaction, and you're looking a profit from all of the marketing that you do, well, when you right, you can only afford to spend so much money to acquire a single customer, right? If it costs you $100 to let's say you sell a $50 product, and let's say you sell a $100 product, and there's and out of that $100 product you want $30 of profit, right? So you sell a product that's got no cost of goods. You sell a product for $100. You want to maintain at least a 30% profit margin so that you can, for every $100, you can extract out, $30, right? Well, what that means is that for you to acquire a single customer, you cannot afford to spend more than $70, right? If you spend more than $70 to acquire a single customer, then you lose that 30% profit margin. So over here, you can only afford to spend $70 to acquire a customer. Well, level 2 is where we start almost all of our coaching clients and consulting clients when they come to me. If they're coming from a level 1, or if they're unsure of where they are really, we always start them at level 2. And level 2 is simply this: it's break even. It's an equal amount of money that comes back, or an equal amount of money that we lay out for an equal amount of money that comes back. So when I said earlier that when we invest $1 and we get $1 back, that is break even on the front end. Right, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about laying out $1 and getting $1 back. Now, this is obviously more aggressive than level 1, right? Because what this means, if we use that same $100 to $100 sale, and we said that on level at level 1, we said we were selling a $100 product, and they wanted to maintain a 30% profit margin, that means that they can only afford to spend $70 to acquire a customer. Whereas level 2, because we're willing to break even on the acquisition of this customer, right, and the sale is $100, that means that we can afford to spend $100 to acquire a customer, right? We can be more aggressive in the acquisition of customers. That means over here for example, right, that you can see if you have the same budget, you can see that if you have a let's call it a $700 budget, or a $1,000 budget, you can see that what we have to acquire over here, right, puts us at a disadvantage from what we have to acquire over here. In other words, right, like for $1,000, you understand that we have to have $300 worth of profit, right, out of this. Whereas over here, we're willing to invest all of this, the full ad spend, to acquire customers. And if there's zero profit in here, we're okay with that, right? That is why this is a more aggressive level. This is the safest place to operate when you understand direct response. It's also the safest place to operate when you're launching a new venture, because there's no money out of pocket. You lay it out, it comes back. You lay it out again, it comes back. You lay it out again, it comes back. You're not banking on any future earnings or future value or lifetime customer value or anything like that. Then you've got the third level. The third level is the investor level. And the investor level looks beyond just the front end transaction, right? Looks beyond just what is that customer worth in that very first transaction. See, understand that this level simply looks at the first transaction. It's looking at what is that first transaction worth, what is the first transaction, what does the customer spend with us on that first transaction, and therefore what can we afford to spend to acquire that customer. The reality is that the big difference between these two is in the way they look at the customer and the transaction, meaning that in level one, it is somebody's acquiring a customer, right, to generate a transaction. At level two, it's where we flip that and we begin to look at, we're generating the transaction to get the customer, meaning that we know that the real value is in the customer. The real value is in the future worth of the customer. So we're willing to participate in this first transaction to get a customer. Whereas at level one, the mindset is, I'm getting a customer, right? So I can get this transaction because that's where the profit comes from in my business, right? That's the difference. Here, what it is that we're looking at is we're taking this further. When it comes to the investor, we're taking this further, and now this is, you are looking at your customers and what you can afford to spend to acquire a customer through the lens of an asset acquisition investor. You are now looking at what is that asset worth today, right? What is that asset worth today, right? What do I have to spend today to get that asset, right? And then what is that asset worth in the future? And what I mean by that is, imagine this, right? And you're gonna see how to do this. You're gonna see the 3 criteria to use and how to start making this decision in just a second. But the thing that I want you to understand, if you're like, I hate the idea of gambling. I don't gamble at all. I don't view traffic or media buying or the acquisition of customers through the lens of a gamble. It's not a gamble, right? It is. I view it as investing scientifically, but I view it as more reliable than traditional investing. Because with traditional investing, you might say, hey, this particular stock, Hershey stock is worth X number of dollars today, right? It's worth $100, right, today. So I could buy it for $100, but I believe that it's going to go up in value and be worth more than $100. And so I'm willing to make that investment. The beauty of what it is that we do is that the only time you become an investor is when you understand the criteria I'm about to share with you. And when you understand that criteria, you know what the stock is going to be worth in the future. There is no guesswork. You know what the stock is worth today. You know what it is that you can buy that stock for today, and you know what it is that that stock is going to be worth in the future. There is no guesswork. There is no assumption. There is no wondering, right? So it's so much safer than your typical investment. Why do I say that? How are we able to know what it is that the customer is worth? Well, it goes back to what it is that we're about to talk about, which is lifetime value. It goes back to knowing what it is that your average customer is worth. It's going back to knowing what it is that the average customer spends with you. Not what each customer spends with you, but what the average customer spends with you. Some may spend $1,500, some may spend $700, some may spend 10, some may spend 50. But when you know that the average customer spends, let's say $450, right, to you, with you, on average, the average customer will be worth $450. Some will be worth more, some will be worth less, but on average, $450. Well, if they spend $100 today, right? They spend $100 today. That tells you a lot about what you should be willing to invest to make that transaction, right? To get that customer who is then going to go on and be worth $450 more to you, right? And so hopefully that is beginning to take shape for you and you're beginning to understand the thought process, right? Over here, when we know what this customer is worth, right, to us in the future, we can then go back and we can look at, wow, that customer is worth $100 today, right? That tells me a lot about what I should be willing to invest to make this transaction happen. How much money should I be willing to fork out to get $100 back plus a customer that I know on average is worth $450? See the way, the thinking, the mindset, the perspective that you need to have when you are thinking like an asset acquisition investor? It's very, very different from the typical marketer who, even though they might intellectually, right, get it, or logically they understand this whole premise, it's a completely different ball game when I'm looking at what is it that I'm willing to fork out today on Facebook? What is it that I'm willing to fork out today when doing email solo drops? What is it that I'm willing to fork out on a particular banner ad when it comes to the acquisition of a customer? And here's the thing, right? I want you to write this down. Okay, I want you to write this down. That this comes from, and it's so amazing how it is like this, right? How these correlations. That, it was Warren Buffett, the greatest investor possibly ever, right? The guy can, like, the benchmark for investors. When he talks about investing, he always says that he makes his investment decisions. First of all, he talks about how he doesn't invest in stocks, right? He invests in businesses, right? He's not, it's not like some abstract concept, some abstract idea. He is investing in assets, in businesses, right? In businesses. And he makes his investing decision based on one single share. What is one share of this company worth, right? What is one share of this company worth, right? What is it worth today? What will it be worth, right? What can I afford to spend to get one share? That's how he makes his decision. He's not looking at this monster thing. He's not thinking about 50,000 shares. He's not thinking about acquiring the line. He's thinking about it as a business, and he's thinking about it as what is one share worth. Why do I share that with you in this context? Because that's the same way you need to look at every single traffic source, is that you're looking at it on a per customer basis. You're looking at it on a what can I afford to spend? What can I afford to invest to acquire one customer? That's what you need to know. One customer through a particular traffic channel. One customer. Now, there are really three criteria that you need to understand, that you need in order to operate at this level. And I'll tell you that this is the level that the biggest direct response companies operate at, right? That doesn't mean that you should jump to here, but that means that you want to go from, if you're operating at this mom and pop, immediately you should go to break even. Once you are at break even, then you need to, as quickly as possible, go to the level 3, and you go to level 3 with the 3 criteria that I'm going to share with you in just a second. But the thing to understand is that what this is all about is aggressively acquiring assets. Aggressively meaning, how much money are you willing to lay out today? How much money are you willing to invest to get a customer? Forget what the transaction brings you today, right? Forget what that very first transaction, that very first sale brings you today. It's the idea of recognizing that a customer is going to be worth more and more and more money to you, right? And the beauty is that even if you see that the average customer is worth $450 to you today, if you are approaching your business the right way, the way I'm going to share with you in just a bit on the back end, that value is going to increase, right? Your customers are going to be worth more than 450, right? Your customer, that's going to grow. It's going to go to 475. It's going to go to 525. It's going to go up the longer you operate your business. Remember, the goal is to maximize profit by maximizing lifetime customer value, by constantly increasing lifetime customer value. That's on the back end. But your acquisition aggression is all about how much money are you willing to invest to get a customer, right? Of course, there's how much money are you willing to lay out to get a customer. There's a certain amount of money that's going to come back immediately, right? But that's insignificant. Right? That's insignificant, because when you understand that you're investing in an asset, right, and that asset is worth more money in the future, right, you're investing in the acquisition of assets, right? It's why, a very simple example for those of you that have been around for any significant length of time, you may be familiar with Eben Pagan, right? Well, when he was operating, under the pen name David D'Angelo with his Double Your Dating, it was, right? How did he grow that particular company very quickly, right? Well, the reality is it came down to psychology, communication, and arithmetic. It came down to arithmetic. It came down to numbers, right? He was willing to pay partners more than what it is that he collected on the front end. Meaning, I forget what the dollar, I forget what the amount was. He was selling a $40 product, or maybe it was a $29 product at the time, and he was willing to pay partners $50, right? To the typical mom and pop, that would be a horrifying business mistake, right? To the person who's break even, who's operating at level 2, that is, they're not there yet. But the reality is, why was Eben willing to shell out $50 for every $29 customer, or whatever the exact number was? Right? Why was he willing to go out of pocket? And basically what he's saying, he was willing to take, call it, $20, 20 some odd dollars, go out of pocket $20 for every customer that a partner sent him. He was willing to actually take $20 out of his pocket plus 100% of the sale, and he was able to give it to affiliates. Why? Because he was thinking like an asset acquisition investor, and because he knew of the value of that customer. He knew on average what those customers were worth to him, and so because of that, he understood, of course, it was worth taking $20 out of his pocket if that meant that he would get an asset worth $350, right? An asset that would return $350 to him over the next year. It's like, look, would you be willing to invest $20 today in order to get back a year from now $350? How many of you would be willing to invest $20 today into an investment, into a stock, into a vehicle, if you were guaranteed that in 1 year it would pay you back $350, right? Well, if you look at the average rate of return, if you look at the average return rates that investors get, they would kill for that. Right? That's crazy. The thoughts of, to be able to, if you could get back $40 for $20 in the stock market, you're killing it within a year, right? Let alone returning $350 for 20. But that's what Eben was doing over here, right? That's what the savviest marketers do. It's not about the least that we can spend. It's not about about the least that we're willing to invest. It's about what is the most amount of money that I am willing comfortably, that I can reasonably afford to invest to get a customer. And so there are three criteria. And Dave said it's like risk tolerance in investing, but you already know the future value of the stock. You're absolutely right, Dave. That's it. It's saying I know what this is worth today, meaning I know what I'm going to get back today, but I also know what it's worth, on average into the future, right? It's like saying, hey, I can get a stock that's worth $10 today. So I can spend $10 and get back a $10 stock today and know that in a year that stock is going to be worth $50. Well, would you be willing to invest? Right, the mom and pops are only willing to invest $7 today to get that $10 stock. Why? Because they're looking at immediate transactional value, immediate transactional profit. The break-even person is saying, hey, I'm only willing to shell out $10 to get that $10 stock back because I don't want to lay out any more money, right? And this may be okay for a certain point, but if you really want to get filthy rich, if you really want to get wealthy with this type of investment, which we are all doing anyway, right? We're all operating within the same game. It's just a matter of what level we choose. Then it's, well, my gosh, this is going to be worth $50 in 12 months. So legitimately, like, how much would I be willing to spend? Would I be willing to spend $20 today? Would I be willing to spend $30 today? Would I be willing to spend $40 today? How much would I be willing to spend knowing that this investment is going to be worth $50 in 1 year? Well, there are three criteria that you need to have in order to be able to operate at level 3. Right? There are three things that you need to understand. The first one is you need to understand lifetime customer value. That just means you need to know what is the average value of a customer in your business. That means the average total value of a customer. Total value meaning it's over the life of their patronage. So if your business has acquired, let's say for argument's sake, you have acquired 1,000 customers. You've acquired 1,000 customers, right? And your customers have spent, let's call it $100,000 with you total. They've spent $100,000 with you. That means on average a customer is worth $100. Right? So you have an average lifetime customer value of $100. Some customers might only be worth $10 for you, right? Some customers might be worth $50. Some customers might be worth $100. Some customers might be worth $180. But on average, every single customer is worth, in this particular example, is worth $100. That's the simplest way to calculate lifetime customer value. Now, there's lots of different formulas that you can use. It's not an exact science because let's say a year ago you changed your business model around. Well, you might not want to go back and look at the customers that you generated prior to that, right? You might not want to go back and look at the old model because that could skew your lifetime customer value way down. The new customers that you're acquiring could be worth a lot more. As well, over the course of time, you're assuming if you're doing things the right way, that the average lifetime customer value is going to increase, right? Like, for example, if you've got a continuity program, if you've got a subscription, right, that where people are paying you on a month-to-month basis, well, then every month that you do business, right, you should be seeing an increase in your lifetime customer value. If you launch a brand new continuity program or a brand new business around a continuity program, right, and you're 3 months in and your continuity program is $50 a month, right? Well, the maximum lifetime customer value that you could have is $150, right? Because it's $50 over the course of 3 months. But when once you get to the 4th month of billing, that average lifetime customer value could increase, right? If you have a great stick rate, if you're minimizing refunds and whatnot. And so over time, that lifetime value could go up, which is why you've got to continue to monitor on a monthly basis what is the lifetime customer value, so that you understand, are we still acquiring assets worth $100 or are we acquiring assets that are worth $120 or $130, right? What is the value of the asset that we are acquiring? The next criteria is what I call cash flow float, or really it's really what we would call on-hand cash. For whatever reason, I think of it as cash flow float because it is how much cash flow can you float? How much cash can you float? What that means is this, is if I said to you, if I said to you, and I want you to understand, I want you to start to get the full picture of this. Like, I want you to start to see the full context of this. That if I said to you that there is a $10 stock. Tell me this. I want somebody to answer me this. If I said to you there is a $10 stock, well, first of all, there's a $10 stock. You can acquire $10 stock today. Is it a good investment? Somebody tell me what the answer is. There's a $10 stock. Is it a good investment? Take a drink. Right. So very good. I love it. So Jeff says not enough info. Dave said not enough info. James said it depends. We need more info. Kerry said depends. You guys are all right. I can't slip anything by you. No, you guys are all right. So what we need to know is obviously what is that investment going to be worth, right? So let's say I said to you that the investment is going to be worth $50 in 6 months. So it's $10 today. It's going to be worth $50 in 6 months. Is that a good, is that a good investment? And I know good is subjective, but can we call it a good investment? So, so Jeff said yes. Kerry said sounds good. James said very likely. Shane said, oh yeah, baby. Dave said it depends, and depends on whether or not you need to pay the light bill. So Dave, in a sense, is correct, but he's not correct in it is a good investment, right? If you can get back 5 times your money, and you can do that in a 6-month period, just as an example, show me another place where you can go and get 5 times your money back, $5 for every $1 you put in 6 months. What Dave is really saying, though, and James is right. We could get into the nuances. Opportunity, you can't forget opportunity cost. That just means, is there another place where you could put in $1 and get back 6 or 7 or 8 and so certainly if there's a better place, a place that'll give you a higher return on investment, the answer is that you might be more apt to go with the higher return on investment. Doesn't mean that. Look, just because something is a higher return on I would strive to do both, assuming that there's a limit on what I can invest on the higher ROI one. But I want to address what Dave said. He said, depends on whether or not you need to pay the light bill. Well, it's not really fully correct, because whether you need to pay the light bill or not doesn't change whether it is a good investment. It just changes the feasibility of you leveraging that investment. And what I mean by that is it comes down to on-hand cash or cash flow float. And that is, if I asked you how many shares of that stock would you like to invest in? So it's $10. It'll be worth $50 in 6 months. How many shares do you want to invest in, right? Do you want 1,000 shares? That means that you need to have $10,000 of on-hand cash, right, that you can float for the next 6 months, right? So do you want 1,000 shares? Do you want 10,000 shares? Well, if you want 10,000 shares at $10 a pop, that means that you have to have $100,000 of on-hand cash to float for the next 6 months. Whether or not you can leverage that investment and scale that investment depends on your on-hand cash, your cash flow float. Each and every one of you, that's a different scenario, right? And really, when I say on-hand cash, it can somewhat go back to Dave, like how much of that on-hand cash is needed for to pay the bills, needed for you to feed your family, right? That's a number that only you can determine in your business. The third one is the other one that we had built into ConversionFly, which is another reason why I'm jacked about ConversionFly, which is break-even speed. Because right now, the question is not necessarily now the question becomes this, the question is not, we know that let's say in this example, we said that there is a $10 stock, right? We know that in 6 months, it's going to be worth $50, right? How many shares do you want? Right? Depends a lot on your, it depends on your cash, your on-hand cash, your cash flow float. But it also, what plays a role, or should play a role, is break-even speed, and that means where the world, where things differ a bit from us, well, somewhat from the typical world of investing is, so let's say it would be worth $50 in 6 months, right? And it would be worth $50 in 6 months. And so I said to you, all right, so you want, excuse me, you want 10,000 shares, or let's say 1,000 shares. Do you want 1,000 shares? Right? Well, in your mind, you're thinking, wow, okay, so 1,000 shares, that means I've got to lay out $10,000 for the next 6 months. But that's not the case, because what if in 2 days we knew the stock was going to go up to $20, right? In just 48 hours, the stock was going to go up to $20, right? Allowing you in 48 hours to cash out on the stock and recoup your money, meaning that you get to break even in 2 days, right? See, now it changes the ball game, right? The speed at which you get to break even, the speed at which you get your money back is critical, because it tells us, right? It tells us the speed at which we can use that money again, the speed at which we can turn over that money again in other investments, in other channels, right? It tells us how quickly we get our money back. See, because if it took you to 6 months to get your money back, right, even knowing lifetime customer value and even knowing your on-hand cash flow, you might say no. But once we see break-even speed, right, now the game can change radically. And that's why the beauty of this is break-even speed is all about how quickly do you recoup 100% of your ad spend, right? So when you're operating at level 3 and you see that we put out $1, right, but we're only getting back 20 cents, well, in what time frame do we get back that other 80 cents to get us to break even? How quickly does that happen? Because the thing that I want you to understand is that tells me it gives me additional insight into how negative we're willing to go, meaning how aggressive am I willing to be? Meaning that look, again, when you go back and listen to this again, when you understand what an asset is worth today, and you understand what an asset is going to be worth to you in the future, right? And you understand how much money you have on hand, the next thing that you want to know that'll tell you everything that you need to really make this decision about your acquisition aggression is how quickly do you recoup that money. Because I don't care, frankly, if we could spend $1 and get back 10 cents today and that's it, but in 2 weeks we would get back the other 90 cents, and then a week after that, meaning a total of 3 weeks, we're profitable. Man, I'm going to be willing to be a lot more aggressive with the acquisition there than I would if we didn't get to break even for 3 months, right? Because you've got to think that, for that means that if you're acquiring customers every day, that means that money is going out of your account every day that you won't see come back for 3 months. But if in this case, I see that money come back in 10 days, well, wow, maybe you can float 10 grand for 3 days, right? Maybe you can float 20 grand for 3 days. You see, when you start to look at your money and you start to look at your ad spend that way, you start to realize, holy cow, I can become a lot more aggressive with what it is that I'm doing to acquire the most valuable asset in my business, which is customers, right? That's why I say it's math. It's simple math. It's not like, right? I'm no mathematician by no means, right? It took me 6 years to get a 4-year college degree in a completely different subject, right? But I do understand that it is all about how much money goes out, how much money comes back, and what's the time frame in which that happens, right? And how much can I afford to have go out before I have to have it come back, right? Because understand that I understand. Look, I understand what an asset is if I told you, like, look, you can invest in a multi-million-dollar building, you need 100 grand, right, that you have to front right now, but understand that in a week that 100 grand will come back to you, and then in another month another 100 grand will come back to you, and then it will just continue to escalate to $5 million over the next 8 years, right? Well, you would figure out a way to get that 100 grand to make that investment, right? Because you know that there's a lot that you'd be willing to do to front the 100 grand today, to get back 100 grand in 7 days, to get back another 100 grand in 30 days, to then be the owner of a multi-million-dollar building that's going to pay you monthly ongoing. But that's the same exact thing that we're doing with customers. That's the same exact mindset that we are taking with customers. These are the 3 criteria that you need to understand for your situation, for your business: lifetime customer value right now, right? On-hand cash flow, and the speed at which you get to break even. Now, the thing to really think about once you understand those numbers, those 3 numbers, is for maximum acquisition aggression, you must determine your maximum allowable acquisition cost. That means, what is the maximum dollar amount that you are willing to spend on the front end to acquire a new customer, period. The maximum allowable acquisition cost. To start simple, you can use one number, meaning you can look at the average lifetime customer value in your company. You don't need to look at it on a per funnel basis. You can look at simply what is the average lifetime customer value of a customer. You can look at what is the average front end transaction value, meaning what does the average customer spend with you on their first transaction, right? So what is the average front end transaction value? What is the average lifetime customer value? You can look at your on-hand cash, you can look at your break-even speed, and then you come up with the maximum allowable amount that you can afford to spend to acquire a single customer. Knowing what your average front-end transaction value is from a single customer, knowing what your average lifetime customer value is for a single customer, knowing how much money you have on hand, right? Excuse me, and how quickly you are able to get to break even. That should tell you what is the maximum that you are allowed, and it really shouldn't be allowed. It should be maximum determined acquisition cost, right? Or maximum agreed upon acquisition cost. But it's typically referred to as maximum allowable acquisition cost. And this is the maximum dollar amount that you are willing to spend to acquire a customer. Now, as you begin to use ConversionFly more and more, you can get more and more myopic with this, where you can actually do it on a per funnel basis. So you can begin to look at on a per funnel, per traffic source basis, what that maximum allowable acquisition cost is, meaning that you'll be able to see that from Facebook, your break-even speed is much quicker, the lifetime customer value is much higher, and than it is for Google. You'll be able to see specifics. But when starting, the easiest way is to determine your maximum allowable acquisition cost, the maximum amount of money, and your goal, right, is to be willing to spend it to acquire a single customer. Whether it's $1,000, whether it's $500, whether it's $300, right? You have to find that maximum allowable cost. If that number is too low, your growth rate, the speed of growth, will be slower than it could be, right? If it's too high, that puts your company in danger of running out of capital needed for operations. And so you determine, like I said, based on those 3 criteria, your maximum allowable acquisition cost. That's the front end, and it's no more complicated than that. It really isn't. We've talked a lot about the concepts and the numbers and understanding what those numbers mean and understanding why. But that's at the end of the day, it really does come down to just understanding what's the maximum maximum that we can afford to spend to acquire a customer, right? And then and ultimately my goal is to have that number increase over time. I want to raise this number, meaning I want to increase the amount of money that we can spend. The way you increase the amount of money that you could spend is by increasing the average front end transaction value and by increasing the average lifetime customer value, by increasing these two. As this number goes up, we're able to spend more. As this number goes up, we're able to spend more. As both of these numbers go up, we're able to spend more to acquire a customer. And this is all about front end transaction, right? All about front end. Now, what I will tell you is that on level two, when you're starting out at level 2, the only way that we can afford to spend more money to acquire a customer is by increasing average front end transaction value. Remember, at level 2, we're not taking into account lifetime customer value. We're only looking at front end transaction value. If right now the average front end transaction is $100, well, that's the maximum allowable acquisition cost that we have. If we can increase this through optimization, through using those optimization metrics, opt-in rate, sales conversion rate, order form abandonment rate, and upsell take rate, and we can get this up to, let's call it 120, right? $120. Now our maximum allowable acquisition cost is increased to $120, right? Whereas for level 1, if they use this number simply to determine the maximum, like they use a percentage of this number, whereas we're using this whole number as well. They're also using this number. If they increased it from 100 to 120, they're not increasing their average their maximum allowable acquisition cost. On level 1, they're just seeing more profit. And so in them, they're extracting more profit, whereas we're recognizing the purpose, the objective of the front end is maximum acquisition. So that means we can afford to spend more. And understand, when you can afford to spend more, when you can spend more, right? When the maximum allowable acquisition cost goes up, right? You're able to do things that your competitors are not able to do. You're able to tap into sources and channels and mediums that they can't. You're able to use direct mail for acquisition when they're not able to. You're able to use Google AdWords and certain keyword phrases that they're not able to, because they're not able to, they can't afford it, right? And so you're able to do things that you're able to scoff up all of the partners and all the affiliates, because when with your competitors, affiliates might make only $7 they might only earn $7 for every click that they send, but for you they might earn $17 for every click. Who do you think they're going to go to? Right? They're going to go to you. They're not going to send traffic to somebody else, right? They're going to go to where they get the most amount of earnings per click, right? And that's determined by what it is that you can afford to spend. Just like I'll tell you that, like with ConversionFly, we're getting ready in a handful of weeks to do the big public release, right? Where it's going to be the regular public price, and we're going to be working with a small handful of partners. And so we're interviewing partners right now, individuals that we want to allow to promote ConversionFly. We had a whole bunch of people that reached out to us. They wanted to promote it. We told them obviously that we were doing kind of this last wave of beta, and that only when we do the public launch are we going to consider working with just a handful of partners. And so when I spoke to Damien, the co-founder and the COO of Marketing Funnel Automation, I just said to him, right, all I care about is what's the maximum allowable acquisition cost. What is it that we are willing to invest to get a customer for ConversionFly? Now it is, it's I don't know right now because I don't have the lifetime customer value number, but what is it that I'm willing to invest on the front end, right? Like what is it that I'm not, what it is that forget what it is that we're going to charge, forget what it is that we're going to bring in. What is it that I'm willing to shell out of my pocket, right? How much am I willing to shell out to get a customer of ConversionFly? Am I willing to have $50 come out of my pocket, just out of my pocket to get a customer of ConversionFly? Would I be willing to do that? Right? Well, the answer is yes, I certainly would be willing to do that. And so, right, would I be willing to spend 80? Would I be willing to spend 100? Would I be willing to spend 200, right? Because a lot of that has to do with what it is that we're willing to pay partners, right? And so understand that that's what that maximum allowable acquisition cost tells you. It's the maximum amount of money that you can afford to have go out of your account, your bank account, to acquire a particular customer. Yeah, and so Shane asks, Todd, so when you're just starting up a new funnel or a new product, how do you baseline the maximum allowable acquisition cost to start up your paid traffic? Do you run a small beta test or get to a baseline first? Great question, Shane. So understand that maximum allowable acquisition cost. So first of all, I will start with a new funnel at level 2. And so my maximum allowable acquisition cost is the average front end transaction value. Meaning, so like, right, so whatever the average front end transaction value is, that's going to be my maximum allowable acquisition cost. But as I begin to get a better understanding of lifetime customer value, remember that you can't go negative. You can't go to level 3 and take that investor mindset until you know what the average lifetime customer value is, right? Because or else you're investing in an asset and you have no idea what that asset is going to be worth in the future, right? So when you're at level 2, the maximum allowable acquisition cost is your average front end transaction value. It's on average, what is that transaction worth? But then as you go beyond that, when you start to get a handle on lifetime customer value, then your maximum allowable acquisition cost is going to increase, and it's going to be based on more than just that average front end transaction value. It's going to become based on that average front end transaction value and lifetime customer value. And so hopefully that makes sense, Shane. And so now let me switch to the back end. And to consistently grow your back end profits, it really comes down to 2 things. And I want to give those of you that maybe were at MFA Live, or I think I might have actually written an article about this, or that those of you that are in Mentor to a Million. Mentor to a Million folks were the first clients that I shared this with. Let me give credit where credit's due. This comes right from Clayton Makepeace, right? And with a twist, right? Clayton Makepeace, for those of you who don't know who Clayton is the highest paid active copywriter today, generates over $1 million a year in commissions in royalties, from copy that he writes for one single client. He's generated somewhere in the ballpark of $25 million of royalties for himself writing copy. He was the copy chief for Gary Bencivenga, who's also considered one of the greatest living copywriters of our time. Clayton puts out some of the sickest copy you will ever read. And the dude is just brilliant. And I was a guest expert for Rich Schefren at a mastermind that folks pay about $35,000 to be in attendance at. It was me, Rich Schefren, and Clayton Makepeace. And Clayton said this one thing about the health of your customer list, the health of your back end. And I thought it was brilliant the way he said it. And so I want you to get this. And so, excuse me, but what he said, I just think was brilliant. And he said, in some way, shape, or form, what he said was to consistently grow your back end, to consistently grow your profits, to consistently monitor the health of your business, the health of your back end. You really need to look at 2 things. You need to look at what I call your customer volume and your RFM scores. Your customer volume and your RFM scores. This is the way that I want you to look at and manage the back end of your business going forward every single month. It's so freaking simple, but it's so wildly powerful, and it is like a simplified way that the pros, the direct response pros, look at and analyze their back end. And again, I know we work with some of the biggest in the game, from Agora Financial to Dr. Al Sears, right? And so here it is that, and this is actually the last slide, believe it or not. And so that you want to look at these 4 things on a monthly basis. You want to have a simple score that you look at on a monthly basis. How you set up this scoring is going to be different in each of your businesses, but I'm going to explain to you what you look at and why this is so insanely powerful. The first one is customer volume, and we could really call this customer growth, right? And it's the growth of what's typically referred to as the growth of your customer file. Really, all we're talking about is how many customers do you have this month compared to last month, right? And so we certainly need to see that our customer file is growing, right? That the amount of customers that we have in our back end that is growing. Very easy, very straightforward, common sense. The next one for your RFM scores, RFM, the R stands for recency. And this is nothing but the percentage of customers, the percentage of your customers that have purchased within a period of time. Now, this period of time is different is going to be different in each of your businesses. For example, if you run a subscription business or subscription-based business, let's just say, where you've got a newsletter that you run, or a membership site, and people are billed every month. So you might look at the percentage of your customer base that has participated in a transaction in the last 30 days. Right? That may be your business, right? Because like you do monthly transactions. You might have a mix of one-off promotions, one-off products, as well as subscriptions and that, or you might have one-off product, right? You might use what percentage have purchased within the last 90 days. But what we're looking for is we're looking for an analysis, an RFM analysis of your customer file, and we're looking for the percentage of your customers that have purchased within a period of time. Let's use it for example purposes. Let's say that it's 90 days. The next number that we're looking for is frequency. And excuse me. And frequency, you can look at it a couple of different ways, but the typical way that we look at it is the percentage of your customers that have purchased X amount of times, right? So this could be, let's say 3 times, right? So what percentage of your customer base, right, has purchased from you 3 or more times? So already you're seeing what percentage of your customer base has purchased from you, has made a transaction within the last 90 days, and what percentage of your customer base has purchased 3 or more times. The last one is monetary value. And there are 2 different ways to look at monetary value. We sometimes use each. We sometimes use each of these. My wife, let me just tell her that I am on a very important training. Gotta always answer the phone when your wife calls. And so, hang on. Okay, so monetary value is one of 2 ways. Monetary value is the percentage of your customer list that has spent a certain amount of money with you, right? So this could be what percentage of your customer list has spent $1,000 or more with you, right? And so what percentage of your customers has spent $1,000? That could be 10 products at $100 each. It doesn't matter. They've spent a certain dollar amount with you. It could also be a percentage of your customers that have purchased a product over a certain amount. Meaning what percentage of your customers have spent $350, has spent $350 or more on a particular product. Now, I will tell you that this is the one that we use on an ongoing basis. This is the one that we'll use when we're running certain promotions, meaning that there are 2 ways to use your RFM scores. Number 1 is we want to increase these scores every month. So if you look at what percentage of your customers have purchased within the last 90 days, what percentage of your customers have purchased 3 times or more from you, and what percentage of your customers have spent $1,000 or more, right? Well, a perfect score, right, is 300. That means that you've got 100% here, 100% here, and 100% here. When you got a perfect score of 300, right, if you add it up and you got a perfect score of 300, let's say, you know that it's time to increase these numbers, right? That you're like that. It's now time to expand. Meaning, this maybe you might go down to 60 days. This might you might go up to 4 times. This you might go up to 1,300, right? To continue to raise the bar for you. But what we're looking to do is we're looking to continually increase our scores. Your whole mindset with your back end is that your job on a monthly basis is to increase the percentage of customers that have made a purchase within the last 60 days. Remember, I said earlier, this is about active versus inactive, right? If you've got, let's say you've got 90 days over here, right? And you see that 10% of your customers have purchased within the last 90 days. And, that's not very good, right? That means that 90% of your customers haven't bought anything from you in the last quarter of the year. Now, look, if you are, if you run if you sell real estate, that's different, right? You're going to expand this a little bit more. If you run, if you run a subscription business and this is 30 days and you see that you have 10%, a 10% recency score, that means that 90% of your customers are no longer active in your subscription, right? Because they only 10% have made a transaction or participated in a transaction with you in the last 30 days. Frequency, right, is your job at selling your customers more and more things, right? It's your job at taking a one-time transaction or two-time transaction, right, and turning it into a multiple transaction. It gives you insight into, are you being prolific enough with your customers? Or do you have enough offers for your customers? Are your offers in line with what your customers have previously bought, right? Are you making special offers to your customers? I've said before, and I'll say it again, the biggest mistake that you could make with your segmentation between your customers and your prospects is thinking that the prospect segment of your file, of your email list, is the segment to be most prolific with. The reality is that your customer segment is the one to be most prolific with. It's your job is to be most prolific with the people that have already proven to you that they value what it is that you're offering by saying yes to you already, by buying something from you. Right? It's amazing how, if you really think about it, it's amazing how the reality is that, most marketers, they focus on the people that have already said no and have said no multiple times, and they constantly ask those people, do you want to buy something? No. Do you want to buy something? No. Do you want to buy something? No. And the people that have already said yes, especially the people that have said yes multiple times, they think, ooh, I don't want to bother them, right? They're customers. I don't want to upset them. I don't want to piss them off, right? They already, those are the people that said yes. Those are the people that said yes multiple times. If you were going to ask somebody out on a date, your chances of getting a yes from somebody that has already said yes to you 2 times or 3 times is a lot more than the person who said no to you every time you've asked. Who should you be investing your time in? The person who's already said yes. Specifically, the people that have said yes more often than not. So the first way is you want to increase the recency, frequency, and monetary value, right? This is how we increase your profits, by focusing on, right, by making sure, first and foremost, this is kind of like, you have to consider customer volume, which is really front end, right? It's front end. This is really coming in from the front end, right? The front end, and is this baby being fed? And then we go into the recency, frequency, and monetary value. And our job is to increase these on a monthly basis. Every month we focus on how are we going to get more of our customers to participate in a transaction this month, right? How are we going to get more transactions from our customers, and how are we going to get people to spend more money with us, right? And to get them up to these higher levels, right? All of these things add up to lifetime customer value and the velocity at which you increase lifetime customer value. The last thing that I'll share about this is that we use RFM scores, or an RFM analysis, when we are identifying our highest value segments on our list, right? So when I hosted earlier this year the Big Idea Bootcamp, which was a $10,000 2-day event down here in West Palm Beach, Florida, I wanted to send out a direct mail piece. And so we identified, I think, a particular segment of our list. I think it was, it could have been, I don't remember. There could have been, I don't even remember how many people were on that segment, but I looked for the people that had purchased recently. I looked for the people that had participated in a certain amount of transactions, and the people that had already spent a certain amount of money with me, right? So they recently purchased, so they're active, they've participated in multiple things, so they're demonstrating rabid interest, and they've spent a certain amount of money, they've demonstrated behavior, that they value what it is that I have to offer, and they are willing to invest their money. And so these were the people that we invested money in sending them a direct mail package, right? And these were the people that we primarily used to promote the Big Idea Bootcamp for. And so this tells you a lot about who you should be focusing on. The other thing is that it also tells you a lot about for example, who you should be making an offer to, right? If there's a group of 100 customers, there's two groups of 100 customers each. These people haven't purchased something in the last 12 months. They have not purchased something in the last 12 months. These 100 people have all purchased something within the last 30 days. Who do you think should get a special, or who do you think, what segment is going to be worth more money to you? This segment is going to be worth more money to you. That doesn't mean that you don't go to this segment, but that means that you go to this segment with a different offer, right? A reactivation offer. This segment you go to with something else, right? You're looking at these scores, recency, frequency, and monetary value, in a completely different light to identify the high value segments of your list. These are the scores that you use on a monthly basis. Now, what I will say is that recency, frequency, monetary value has to come out of your CRM, right? So, it has to come out of your CRM, because we're talking about generating lists of people, right? Actually, people, where are those people housed? And then customer volume, certainly you can look at both through ConversionFly and also your CRM. But there you have it, guys. That is how the Direct Response Pro looks at the front end and looks at the back end when it comes to scaling your business. And so I hope that really brings things into a new perspective for you. I hope that your thinking has been changed, and most importantly, that your actions and the way you approach the investment that you make into customers, that it changes, right? That it's not just about, like, look, for me, right, I want to see you guys quadruple the speed at which you are growing your businesses. I want to see you quadruple the speed at which you are generating sales and revenue. And look, the beauty is that when you understand this, the beauty is that you exponentially grow your business, because this will grow the back end. The front end stuff will multiply your front end. And when you multiply the front end and you put the front end into a back end that is now exponentially or that has been multiplied in its effectiveness, your growth becomes geometric, right? And so this is not simply a doubling of your revenue. This is a multiplying of your revenue. And that only happens through execution. It only happens through a change in thinking, and that change in thinking leads to a change in action, a change in behavior, a change in outcome, right? A change in what you do. And so there you have it. And I apologize if I don't get your name right, Anupam. We use Infusionsoft. I love Infusionsoft. I've used Infusionsoft for probably now close to 10 years. I remember it when it was a beast, when it was really Confusionsoft. It's certainly not Confusionsoft anymore, but I love Infusionsoft. I've heard nothing but good things about ActiveCampaign, but we use Infusionsoft. Many of our clients, our consulting or agency clients, use Infusionsoft, and there's just so much that we can do with Infusionsoft that you just can't so many other platforms like ActiveCampaign or Ontraport. We also use ClickFunnels for lots of our one-off pages. Typically, we build our funnels inside of OptimizePress. our own WordPress installations, just because there's more smart marketing, like automated smart marketing that you could do that you on your own site that you can't do right now with ClickFunnels. But we do use ClickFunnels with Infusionsoft for our CRM. Craig said, great stuff, Todd. Appreciate the info, especially about the back end. Awesome, Craig. Glad to hear it. Jeff said, do you have issues with email deliverability with Infusionsoft? And so, yeah, you certainly can have. There are some people that have some deliverability issues, but one of the things that we're doing just to really shore up our deliverability is we're going to be moving our email deliverability through Mauropost. So we're still going to be using Infusionsoft for all of our segmentation, tagging, all of our customer relationship. So you also said that. That's kind of funny. Yeah. So Mauropost will do that for you. Mauropost will allow you for integration. They're not cheap. I think Mauropost quoted us something like $25,000 for the year, something like that. And that doesn't include Infusionsoft. That doesn't include, that just includes Mauropost doing the deliverability, and they require a 1-year contract. So you've got to hope that at least that's what they said to us. You got to hope that they increase deliverability, or else you're paying $25,000 for. When they first said 25,000, or when I first heard 25,000, I was like, we're not, I'm not trying to buy into Mauropost. I'm not trying to become an investor in Mauropost. I just want an account with Mauropost. And they were like, yep, $25,000 to start with. And so, okay. But yeah, there you go, guys. Hopefully that gives you a whole new clarity. Shane said, loving this, Todd. You have no idea how long I've wanted a measurement tool like this. Me too, man. If you're talking about Shane, if you're talking about ConversionFly, it's the whole reason why I had it created. Like I'm freaking just jacked about it myself. We've been using several tools and then download to a spreadsheet to calculate return. Kudos to you and Damien. Yeah, and I appreciate that. We're gonna just continue to make sure that it's just the most user friendly tool that gives us the real metrics that we need and calculates them the right way. And so there you go. And so Kerry said, brilliant, Todd, well worth waking up at 3:30 a.m. to join you. Wow, that's awesome. Kudos to you for, Kerry, kudos to you for being willing to do that. Let me end on this. I'm going to get on my soapbox for 1 second because I get to do that because it's my training, and share something. And I tip my hat to Kerry. Right? Waking up at 3:30 a.m. And I know that's not the first time that Kerry has done that to participate in stuff and trainings. And I'll tell you, I tip my hat because number one, and I'm not, I'm gonna say it, right. I think that self-praise stinks, but I'm gonna say it anyway, right. It's what I would do, and it's what I would expect anybody else to do that's serious about growing their growing their business. And that is that I've had people that have said before, I've done bonus trainings where a bonus training, like above and beyond what was expected, right? Above and beyond what was promised. And I think once I was traveling and I said, so I'm going to do it on a Saturday morning. And I said, and I'm going to do it at 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning. And I've had people, not many, but that were like, that's a bit ridiculous. It's a Saturday. I'm on the West Coast. I have to wake up at 6 a.m. And I'm like, are you freaking serious? Like, are you serious? Here's your money back on the entire thing. You shouldn't even be in my world if that's how you feel, right? And that's how I feel. Right? Like that we're talking about your business. We're talking about your livelihood, man. We're talking about doing something monumental, doing something amazing. We're talking about changing your life and changing the lives of the people in your tribe. We're not talking about being average. We're not talking about being ordinary. We're not talking about simply making things convenient for you, right? Like, it's mind-boggling to me when I see people that approach their business where it needs to be convenient, it needs to be easy, it needs to be fast, right? It needs to be simple. The reality is, the way I look at it, as the more difficult, the more time-consuming, the harder things are to implement in my business, the more excited I get about them, because I know the harder it will be for other competitors to come along and do it. The bigger the barrier of entry will be, right? The easier it is, the simpler it is, the quicker it is, the more people are going to come along and knock it off. I like the things that are difficult. I want to engage in the things that most people aren't going to be willing to do, right? That's the difference between the average and the extraordinary, right? The average and the all-stars. The all-stars are willing to do the things that are willing to do the things that the average aren't willing to do. And so I tip my hat once again to Kerry, to all of you for being here, but especially to Kerry, who I've seen before. I know that, getting up at 3:30 a.m., something I would do, not easy, but certainly demonstrates an all-star behavior. And so kudos for that. So James, so reach out to, you don't need Funnel Tracks was it's an interesting, I won't even get into, I wasn't involved in the development of Funnel Tracks, but I won't even get into it, but Funnel Tracks was not at all designed the way it should have been designed. And so it's worthless, really. And so I would let it go. I would let it go. And so Shane said, where there's mystery, there's margin, but you got to work hard to solve the mystery. Amen, brother. Amen. Right? Amen. It's why, I believe you got to work. You're willing to work. You use these numbers, you use these metrics, you use this understanding that you've got today, right, in your business, right? And you be willing to work on your business, like you be willing to work harder. I'm willing. I always said I'll leave you with this. I want to stop ranting because I want to keep this on point, and we're already almost 30 minutes beyond what it is that I wanted for you guys today. But look, the reality is that up until this point, I can tell you that that I'm not the brightest I'm not the brightest bulb, right? I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. No, despite what people think, despite what people might say, I'm not a marketing genius. I'm not, I don't bring a whole lot to the table that you guys don't possess as well. The only difference is, right, time and experience and study, right, and that's it. And all of those are things that you guys and gals can certainly gain and get and will develop as well. But I tell you what, that I've said it before and I'll say it again, that I was always willing to do the work, right? That I was always willing to put in the work, put in the time, right? There are lots of people that they just wouldn't work 16 hours a day, right? I was willing to do that. Might not be the brightest, might not be the smartest, might not be the ideal way to operate. And I've grown a lot and I've learned a lot, and I no longer have to do that today, but I was always willing to do that, right? And we put in the work. I don't care how difficult something is. Like, I don't care how tight. We don't make decisions based on the difficulty. In fact, I lean towards the difficult, right? And, I will do what needs to be done to get the job the right way, period. And that's what you need to do as well. That's what you should do as well. And I promise you study what it is that we've talked about today. You study the other trainings that we have available for you guys. You use the tool ConversionFly and watch what happens. You'll dominate. You will dominate. And so that's all she wrote for today. Keep your eye out for an email with the recording if you want to go back through, or if you missed the first part. Thank you guys for being part of this training. Thank you guys for being part of ConversionFly. And I'll talk to you tomorrow at the start of session number 2. And so see you then. Take care, everybody.